Welcome, everyone. I'm here with Dr. Holly Ganz. So if you want to talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and such.
Yeah, I was just curious. I'll do that. I was just curious if anyone can ask questions in the Zoom or how does it link to Facebook?
They would ask the questions on Facebook. Yeah, so please feel free to ask any questions that you have, post them in Facebook, and we will, you know, get them there. I'm still trying yeah, it's not working on Zoom. Zoom is not letting me do it. All right. So for anyone who was hoping to get on Zoom, I'm sorry that it's not working. I mean on YouTube. Anyways, yeah. So just post any comments. Okay. So it sounds like people are capable of hearing us. So
Okay,
that's
good. Before we started, I was like, is anyone there? Can you hear us? Great.
yeah. It looks
So you
every
already know Odette. I'm Dr. Odette Suter. I'm Holly Ganz. I'm a microbiologist, and I am a co-founder of AnimalBiome, which is a company dedicated to empowering pet parents to help support and restore their cat and dog microbiomes. And we do that with a whole range of things, but especially with fecal transplants because they contain all these good bugs that aren't anywhere else, and so many of our pets seem depleted of them.
yeah. Yeah. And today I picked the subject, and by the way, I'm Dr. Odette Suter, in case you don't know me. I'm a holistic veterinarian, and I'm very passionate about the microbiome because it that's where health starts or disease starts, depending. And so, Dr. Holly and I, we met in what was it, 2017 or something like that. So 7 years ago at a conference a holistic veterinary conference, and we just hit it off. And I call her my soul poop sister because anytime we get together, we have a good time and we talk obviously about microbes for the most part. And I remember, you hung out with me at the AHVMA in my room as I was finishing up my lectures for the holistic conference, and you were encouraging me and giving me some extra information on things that, I was still lacking. And so to me, you're one of the people who knows the most about the microbiome and probiotics and, microbes in general. And um, so I always enjoy chatting with you because I always learn something more about them. And so today we're going to talk about probiotics because I know that's a big subject. And a lot of people keep asking the question, should we give probiotics? Should we not give probiotics? Are they beneficial? Are they not beneficial? Etc. So we're going to kind of dive into that. And given that you're a researcher, I know that you have a lot of information on that, and you know what's been going on in that field, and you can kind of give us the scoop on that. So maybe we should start with defining probiotics because I think that's really an important aspect of that.
Well, yeah, so there's like an organization that sort of has agreed upon definitions for some of these terms. And so probiotic is technically supposed to refer to a microbial strain, which could be bacterial or fungal, that has been shown to have a health benefit. This isn't, I don't think, always the case, but that's sort of what it's supposed to mean.
Hmm. Yeah, and that kind of brings me to the point that at least in my practice when I used to do a lot of I mean I used to send everybody home with probiotics way back when. I don't anymore because I didn't really see the benefit. And that's what the definition is, right? It has to have a health benefit. And I didn't really see that very much, at least not in any consistent or like wow sort of way. So I kind of moved away from providing probiotics, but there's still quite a bit of research that's happened in the human field where we can um, actually learn more about probiotics and how they work. But maybe we should talk a little bit about probiotics and also labeling because yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So if you can kind of, take us on that journey.
Me too. I mean, so I think, no, there isn't as much. I'm just sort of at a high level, just to start with. There isn't as much regulation of pet probiotics as there is for humans, and certainly not in either case as much as there is for like medications. But there have been some efforts to at least for companies to sort of self join a society that helps to make sure that at least that they're manufactured in a safe manner. But efficacy is still something, there's no standards regarding really demonstrating benefits. But that being said, some of them have studies showing that they are beneficial. And so it depends. And it's very important when you look at the labeling that there's two things that are really important. And one is, and not everybody does this, and I think it's something that's just going to start to become, I hope, more common, is to actually say what the strain is, because the research has to be done at the strain level. So there's like different kinds of bacterial species, and then below that are actually like strains, and they're like, I don't know the best way to describe it, but the bacteria are different than people, right? So they reproduce clonally, right? And so you can end up with these different lineages that are like subspecies, if you will, and they can have different functions. And so it's important to know, but like I would say, half of the products in the market don't tell you what strain, but we're hoping that that will change, because then you can better link those products to actual research. The other labeling thing that's important is how many are there, right? And one thing I'm seeing with a lot of sort of mixtures of different bacterial groups is that they just say like the whole thing is a certain amount, but it doesn't tell you how much of each one.
Yeah, yeah. And I was thinking about how to explain the species, strain, and such level. So I came up with something last night. Well, with the help of I got inspired by someone else. But in any case, so for example, we have lactobacillus, rhamnosus, and then a bunch of letters behind it and numbers, right? I can't think of one right now, but lactobacillus would be like if you compared it to all the Johnsons in the world. So that would be all the Johnsons are that would be kind of the determination of lactobacillus. And then rhamnosus would be the Johnsons that are actually physically related or genetically related to each other, right? And then the strain level would be the brothers and sisters or the individual members in that family. So for example, there are a lot of people who are, have the last name Suter. I'm only related to some of them. I'm assuming anyway. And then within the people that I'm related to, there's like the family, right? So I have I have a sister, and she has a particular function in the family, and I have a particular function in the family. So that's the strain level. So lactobacillus would be all the suitors, and then rhamnosus would be just my family. And then the strain level usually it shows on the label as like a bunch of letters and the alphabetical mix. That would be, the individual members in the family. So I have a very different function than my sister. I have very different skills than my sister, for example. So that translates into the different strains. So certain strains will have one function, and another strain will have a completely different and sometimes even opposite function. So some strains will have anti-inflammatory function, and other strains will have pro-inflammatory function or immune stimulating function, which is the opposite. So that's why it's so important that we have the strains on the label, so that we can then do some research and really figure out, well, is this particular strain now going to help with this particular issue, and has there been some research done rather than just having lactobacillus or any of the other probiotics in the bottle, because we don't really know what they are and we don't really know what they do exactly. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, for some groups like Saccharomyces boulardii, like almost never, no one labels the strain, and that's something I'm hoping to change. But that's because they're all pretty much the same one, manufactured by the same company. So pretty
Mm,
much all of the ones that you buy in the US are the same. And so I think maybe people don't think it matters as much, but it's still better because you still want to know, like, actually, where is this one coming from? And so it is helpful.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that actually brings me to another question. Who makes all of these probiotics and how are they being made? Do you know
Yeah,
more?
so I know this is the thing, like sometimes when people are like scrutinizing the FMT, and I'm like, you guys don't know how probiotics are made, do you? Because they so
Uh-huh.
it's a whole, I mean, so it's, right, they're manufactured, and there's um a relatively small number of companies that are responsible that for producing most of them. And it's just fermentation, like they use these big vessels to ferment them and create large volumes of them. And that's actually a limited number of facilities can do that. And so like we're trying to create some new ones, and like it's been really challenging to find people to help us with that.
Mm, mhm,
So they for humans, you have to, like, a lot of the microbes that we grow, like you start off growing them with animal products in the growth media, like blood, is a really common thing used to
mm.
grow gut bacteria. It's just a thing that they like. I know it's gross, but
Yeah.
if you make it probiotic, you have to get it on a veggie media. So it's a standard for human probiotics. And so any facility that really wants to manufacture them, even for animals, is going to want to put them on a vegetable-based medium.
Mm, yeah.
And they need to have stability. So there's sort of all these things that they have to be able to grow them affordably. So they try and figure out what's the minimum cost to grow them.
Mm,
How can they be grown at scale? How fast do they grow?
mm. And will that also determine a little bit about, what they're actually growing? Because I'm assuming that certain probiotic, growing certain probiotics would be much more difficult and more costly than others.
Absolutely. So some of them, like, they got anaerobes, the ones that are really um, only just now starting to go onto the market, and we're working on some. Those grow much more slowly and are more costly to grow than a lactobacillus, which you can grow, on milk very
Hmm.
easily. And
Yeah.
like enterococcus is like one of the easiest things possible from the gut to grow, and it's very easy
Hmm.
and isolate and grow. And
Yeah.
that's really common in like some of those sachets on the
Hmm.
market.
Yeah. 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 Because when I look at probiotics, I always wonder, okay, so they don't even write down what the strain is, and then they have a gazillion different ones, and then yeah, I wonder, is it just because those were the cheap ones that they could just add to the bottle to make it sound good? Because, if you have a list of maybe 20 probiotics in there, sounds awesome, right? Whereas, yeah, we really have to look at what these actually are. So, before we came on, I asked you the question about some of these probiotics that we see on the bottle, lactobacillus and bifidobacterium and all of those. Um, are they still present in the animal's gut once they become adults, and or when are they predominant in the microbiome of the animal, and should we provide those later on in life?
So yeah, so those are two wonderful questions. So the first is, what we found is that those groups, lactobacillus and bifidobacteria, are much more abundant and common in young animals, and are really probably important in that early stage of life, and start to decline once the animal weans from a
Mhm,
milk-based diet. 'Cause lactobacillus is really requires some dairy in the diet in order to be there at any appreciable extent. Bifidobacteria actually is a more complicated group, and it tends to be in low abundance, but is does occur. And
mhm,
then there are many different species of it, and some are beneficial and some less so.
mhm,
And so should we be giving them, right? It's a great question. So I mean, I think sort of two things. I think one, well, I personally don't think that if you have a healthy gut that you need to take them regularly, like, because your gut should be functioning on its own. And it's like some vitamins, like you're already getting the vitamins in your diet, then you don't need to keep taking them. If you have a deficiency, then that's when you need to add them, right? And it can be hard to know. I think the number one use for probiotics is as an alternative to antibiotics. And like if they have a flare up of diarrhea, like you can use a probiotic to help support them. And if that resolves it and that helps you to avoid giving antibiotics, then it's really great use, right? Like I'm the biggest fan for Aspergillosis, which has been shown like hundreds of studies to be beneficial for diarrhea. But there are other probiotics that work for that as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that's really important, an important point, because there are a lot of probiotics and other ways to avoid antibiotics because they tend to destroy things. And I don't know as far as how much of this. I mean, there have been some studies done, especially regarding metronidazole, and they figured out that 4 weeks later there was still a significant deficiency in certain microbes, but there have been more studies done with that in humans because, well, humans live a whole lot longer. And I just listened to a podcast from Dr. Havelock. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, but he's one of the big microbiome. Well, he's done a lot of research, and I wanted to mention that, because obviously humans tend to also want to buy probiotics, but he has this website, Probiotic Advisor, and that's where he basically summarizes all the probiotics with the different strains and how they've worked in certain situations. You have to sign up for it, but they do have like a 1 day free sort of trial thing. So if you have probiotics, you can go in there and see, but you have to know what they are at the strain level. Otherwise, the research is not going to really be that helpful. But what I'm gathering from all of these experts in gut health and microbiome and probiotics is that probiotics are only really helpful if there is an issue, and not so much in healthy people, because every time they get asked whether they take probiotics or not, they say no. They would only take them if there was some issue, but not on a daily basis. So how do you feel about that? I mean, what's kind of the research in the animal field in that regard, and do you feed your animals probiotics?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna take the last part first, which is I keep Aspergillosis on the shelf, and if my dogs have a soft stool in the morning, I give it to them, and it's gone like in a day. And so that's my use of it, and then I stop it immediately after that. And we have done some research on looking at the effects of. So we have an isolate collection of hundreds of gut bacteria from cats and dogs, healthy cats and dogs. And then we also have some from sick cats and dogs, like a lot of E. coli, starting to also isolate streptococcus groups. And the really interesting thing that came out with our study that we've been doing on metronidazole, we've been screening many medications, but the results from metronidazole were interesting in that it showed in isolation, both that metronidazole is killing off key groups of bacteria that are really important in things like bile acid metabolism, but it also actually promoted the growth of some of our E. coli isolates. And we always assume that like, oh, E. coli is just coming up, flaring up after antibiotics because its competitors were killed, but not that that actually was being promoted by that medication. But we're an impure culture, right? Where there's no competitive environment there. It's just with and without this medication, it actually grows faster with it.
Yeah. So it's nourishing them.
Yeah. So E. coli is a group that's normal, right, in the gut flora of people and pets, but it should be at low levels and kept in check by competitors. And so we think it probably plays an important function, but it needs to be in low abundance.
Yeah. Well, and there's also different E. coli strains. And talking about I mean, I know we're kind of jumping all over the place, but maybe we can hit the new generation probiotics right now, because I remember I spoke with a internist because I had a cat with recurrent urinary tract infection, or, the microbes were still there. I mean, she didn't have any symptoms anymore, but in any case, we kind of got to talking about fecal transplants and that sort of thing. And she said, oh, yes, they're using some E. coli strains that are non-pathogenic to then crowd out the E. coli that are pathogenic in the urinary bladder. So unfortunately, I couldn't find the study that she was referring to, but there are a lot of different, again, we have to look at the strains. That's the important part, because just because there's one black sheep in the family doesn't mean that everybody else is causing havoc, right? And non-beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, my guess would be that that's the E. coli Nissl, which is a beneficial strain, and somebody owns the rights to that group, but it's very promising for doing that. There are probably a lot of others that could be isolated that are beneficial. The approach that we are excited about is using bacteriophages. So those are these little tiny viruses that kill bacteria, and the name bacteriophage means bacteria eating, and that's because these viruses will inject themselves inside the bacterial cell and then lyse them or rupture open the cell. And when you culture them, they just appear in the culture media as a hole or plaque, is what the microbiologists call it. It's really great because they're very specific to a strain of bacteria, and so they don't kill off the good things. So maybe we should talk a bit about why antibiotics, are a problem. And
go for it.
I mean, the main thing is that a lot of antibiotics are too broad in the different kinds of bacteria that are killed by them, and we need to have them be more specific for the one group that's causing a problem. And these viruses, these little bacterial viruses, are one solution because they are very, very specific.
Yeah, and there are many of them, right? So, like, for example, one E. coli strain, how many bacteriophages would there be for that one E. coli strain?
I mean, they think it's something like 10 to 1, but it depends.
Yeah. In any case, I mean, bacteriophages, they're like a cocktail, but they're not really considered, obviously, probiotics. But are there, I mean, what's happening on the front of the next generation probiotics that you sort of mentioned a little bit and such, that are a little bit more challenging to grow, and why are they more challenging to grow, and what are they? So if you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So so a big focus for us has been on metronidazole and other medications that are really prevalent, and their use is very common in the U.S. And the problem with metronidazole in particular is that it actually it kills the gut anaerobes, and it doesn't harm the air tolerant groups like E. coli, and so it creates a dysbiotic state. And it's so commonly used, and it's used repeatedly in patients that many, many animals are depleted of these gut anaerobes. And the gut anaerobes play really important functions, the most obvious of which is bile acid conversion from the primary to secondary bile acids, which is a whole topic we could spend a whole hour on.
But basically that's just helping with the whole digestive process, and bile acids are released from the gallbladder. They're made by the liver and go into the gallbladder, and then are released in the GI tract, and they do all sorts of things to help with fat metabolism, but they also keep the microbiome in check, right?
And I think that if they don't get reconverted, there can be sort of toxic lower down in the GI tract. And so there's a lot of research in people and pets about that function. And so reintroducing groups of bacteria that help with digestion, especially, starting with bile acid metabolism, has been a big focus. But the thing about gut anaerobes is that healthy gut anaerobes is that they're actually really slow growing. So E. coli is really fast, and that's why it's a problem, right? Because it can sort of take an opportunity and really multiply. But these beneficial groups that are being killed by antibiotic use are slow growers. And so that means it's harder, it takes longer to manufacture them, right? Which means it costs more. But it also means like they're just going to be really important to have. And so figuring it out, I think we are sort of looking at like what's the FMT 2.0, right? Like, which is can we try and create a like, cultivated group of bacteria and maybe some fungi, maybe some bacteriophages that could help be maybe not quite as effective as a fecal transplant, but something that can be, grown commercially and is easier, right? Like it's because of FMT requiring donors, right? And like it's a perishable product. It's we've considered like the gold standard, but it's also just kind of a boutique product, right? Like it's
yeah, it has its own challenges. Yeah. And just for those of you who don't know, anaerobes are basically bacteria who don't like oxygen, so they thrive in an oxygen poor environment, and that in itself would probably make it a little more difficult to grow because there's oxygen everywhere. So would the process of growing them, aside from the slow growing process, also be more expensive just from the equipment standpoint?
It's a great question. I mean, yes, you'd think it would. I think some of them can tolerate a little bit of oxygen, not like E. coli, but and so I think, but there now are like ways to grow anaerobes at scale, and I think the bigger concern that these manufacturers have is the spore forming capabilities, because they don't want their whole environment contaminated with your probiotic when they're going to try and grow other people's. And so some bacteria form a drought tolerant, hardy form, which is a spore, and that can contaminate an environment. And so that's like even the bigger factor. And a lot of them produce spores. The good thing about spores is that that means they can probably survive a lot of manufacturing processes, right? Maybe they could be put into food and actually be viable, which means like actually alive, because a lot of the stuff that's going into food today is not making it through the high heat processes involved with manufacturing.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of begs the question too, what about these probiotics? First off, are they still alive in the bottles? I mean, I know there's been some studies done on that. Can you kind of elaborate on that maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I looked at that study, but I think it was only like 20%, I think, or like there was basically like they did a survey, but it's been over 10 years. Like I think it was done like 2012, where they actually looked at all these veterinary probiotics and found that the vast majority of them were dead, and the ones that and many of the ones that were still viable or alive were much lower amounts than what was on the label.
Yeah.
And I think that I would hope that things have improved. I think somebody needs to review that study. I mean, we could do it, but I think it would be hard because we're also a competitor, and so we probably need to have a third party, do that work for everybody. I think there are more standards with the National Animal Supplements Council, but I expect that it's still a bit of Wild West with probiotics, and all the companies out there, and everybody's saying they have stuff, and there's really not a lot of regulation over it.
Yeah. And I remember reading a study or an article that basically said that even though it said on the label what was supposed to be in there, not many of them actually contained what was supposed to be in there. And I think that's true for other supplements as well, not just probiotics, but it's difficult as the consumer to know exactly what to get and such, and what to buy. And I think, what would you say is a way or ways that people could know more about, what's actually in there? Or what should they look for if they're looking for a probiotic to buy one?
I mean, I think that it can be important probably to develop a relationship with a brand that you come to trust. And instead of just going for like, what's the cheapest one of, let's say you're looking for a specific group of bacteria, You don't necessarily want to buy the cheapest one on the market because a lot of those are being manufactured in China and they can be high quality, but people do also feel strongly about like where are they coming from. So you want them to say where it was manufactured. Ideally, you want them to say what's the strain, how much is in there. They should have some like tell you how long it's stable for. But then I think find a company that you trust and build a relationship there. And I think that is one way through this, because there's just every day more and more products coming right on the market, and it's really hard to navigate.
Yeah, yeah. I think asking whether they have research to back up what their claims are, I think would be important as well, because I have looked at some probiotics that are rather popular and it says we're the best and, we're the only ones and, comes from, I don't know, from some specific wild animal. And I don't want to get anyone into trouble here, but a lot of it, in my opinion, is also marketing tactics, and especially the probiotic industry is huge. And I pulled up some numbers here. Let me just see if I can find them. It's a huge market, basically. In 2022, the U.S. market for digestive health products. So that's not just probiotics, but I think a big amount is probiotics. It was valued at $44.4 billion, and it's supposed to go up a whole lot higher by 2030, which basically indicates that we do have a lot of digestive issues to begin with. But I think there's a huge market, and probiotics take up a big market aspect. And I think that, and I don't want to compare it to the pharmaceutical industry, but there's also, because there's a lot of money involved, and a lot of them have, invested a lot of money in producing their probiotics and putting them on the market and everything like that, they're kind of going to be a bit reluctant to say that, well, their product isn't actually working, or not as well as one would hope. So I think that's kind of a bit of an issue that we're facing as well, that there's money involved, and there's money involved in everything. I mean, even, let me see, because I don't want my computer to just kind of, oh, there we go. I'm having some powering issues. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of money involved in that, that people need to be aware of.
That's right. And there's a lot of marketing involved with this, especially I think the like probiotics going into food right now, because we really aren't there yet to have like probiotics that actually have been shown to have good efficacy, be the ones that are going to food today.
Mm-hmm.
But,
oh, you mean like if they mix it with food?
No, so like there's a lot of bacillus groups going into food now, and it's becoming like very common.
Oh, you mean like already in the food when you buy it?
Yeah, it's like it contains blueberries, and like, but they'll also say like with probiotics, right? And people look for that, and there's pressure on these companies to include them in there, because that's something that people look for. For example, like if you try and sell a chew on Amazon for dogs, if it doesn't have a probiotic, like much harder to sell, because people wanted to check that box. And so it's really tough, because I think a lot of companies, they do want to sell their products to stay alive, right? And even if they care about having products that are beneficial, they might still add some things just because that's what the consumer wants.
Yeah, and then they can put it on the front of the bag, all natural with probiotics and extra omega-3s and whatever else. Yeah. So it's really important that we read labels and look at them. So I guess that brings me to the question of shelf life. So, starting with these foods, what is the shelf life, and do these microbes even survive?
Yeah, it depends on the microbe, but I mean, I think, they should the manufacturer should provide that, and they should have at least an 18-month shelf life. There are some products where if they only have a 3-month shelf life, it's just not a commercially viable product.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well,
there
I
are
mean,
certain,
food that has shelf life of 18 months is questionable to begin with.
yeah, right.
I'm just saying.
That's
Um,
food. That's not what, yeah, I try to avoid yeah, I
yeah.
agree. But a
Yeah.
probiotic like should have 18-month shelf life in a capsule.
Hmm. Yeah. But if a probiotic is on the food itself already, what's the
So,
shelf life? I mean, how are they still going to be? I mean, I know some of the bacillus types, they're spore forming probiotics, so they basically survive radiation, and I think they also sent them out into space, and and they still survived that too. So, oh, that's quite amazing. But I guess uh, is that is it basically just the spore forming probiotics that they put on food, or are there also other ones?
there are some other ones that they can put on like a treat after they can dust it powdered on at the end of the manufacturing process so that it doesn't. But yeah, for food, especially like right these kibbles, that are extruded, it's the bacillus, so those spore forming groups that are really tolerant. And even so, half of them probably die in the process. So they
Okay.
have to put more of them in order to. But I don't know if what they put on the label is what they put in before manufacturing or what they actually measured afterwards. And I'm not sure that they're really required to clarify that.
Yeah, well, I know that with some labeling, if it's below a certain percentage, they don't really have to put it in the label. Or if it came from another manufacturer as a mix, they don't have to declare everything that's in that mix either. So yeah, labeling is, well, I think that the the honest manufacturer will declare things. The less than honest manufacturer will try to hide behind certain claims and things like that. So again, we just have to be careful as far as what do we trust, and do some our due diligence, and ask them, important questions. And if they can't really give you the answers, and they say, well, we don't know, or it's proprietary. That to me, that's always a big red flag. If it's proprietary, I'm like, well, what are you trying to hide? And I know that some will have proprietary formulas, and I still trust them, but still, there's got to be a little bit of research that needs to be done.
Yeah,
Due diligence, and not just buy whatever Schmo said you should buy, or whatever the best seller is on Amazon, or whatever it may be.
yeah. I mean, I think everybody's still learning, and I think there are some good companies that have maybe some bad practices because they're new, they're still learning, right? So they have like a proprietary thing and they don't tell you what's in it and they don't tell you how much, but they still could be a good company and it could be a good product, but they do need to learn and add that information. And I'm hoping that that more companies will do that as they realize that they should.
Mhm. Yeah, but back to shelf stability, how stable are probiotics generally? I mean, you mentioned they should be stable up to 18 months, but should they be refrigerated? Should they not be refrigerated? If they're in a capsule, should they be kept in the capsule and the capsule be swallowed whole, or can you open it up? And what are all the little tips and tricks here that you can provide our amazing listeners here?
Oh yeah, I mean there's a whole range. So some of the powders are microencapsulated, so they don't need to be in a capsule, and that's certainly really popular with people because then you just put it on food. Some of the capsules are just a gelatin capsule, which will still dissolve in the stomach, and there's no problem with opening them up and putting them on the food. If they have an enteric coating, then what you're giving up is like the protection from the stomach acids, which could kill off some of the
Mhm.
bacteria. But the spore forming groups will survive that.
Mhm. Yeah, so they would be the ones that are more shelf stable too for a
That's
long
right.
period of time.
And
Uh,
the yeast Aspergillosis can survive through the stomach. There's been so much
mhm.
work.
Mhm. No, that's good to know. That's good to know. I mean, some microbes obviously have to survive going through the stomach because that's how they get into the system in the first place. It's not like they suck them up with their rear end, right? There's no vacuum coming out of their anus that would just suck up the microbes.
Yeah, no, that we talk about as being like fecal oral transmission. Yeah, there are a lot. These groups should be adapted to be able to go there.
Yeah, yeah. And what about soil based probiotics? What are your thoughts on that?
Well,
Or
I think that as people and pets spend less time outside, maybe it can become important to have exposure to these groups. But there's very little research showing efficacy. I mean, one big challenge is just that when you're already healthy, it's hard to show that you're healthier.
mm-hmm,
So I think I would say while I generally like the idea of them, still looking for more studies to show like clear benefits.
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, didn't you guys do like a study or like a bit of research into some soil-based products?
Yeah, I mean, we're still looking at some. I think that we can say that they support, health. They don't detract from it, but showing that they actually enhance function is hard. But it's really that same challenge of you take a healthy pet.
Mm,
It's hard to show that they're actually doing better.
yeah, yeah.
So then doing studies to look at, improving things for sick pets takes like years. It just takes a lot
Mm,
longer.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But you guys act a bit like a third-party testing lab too, right? Because you do a lot of tests for other companies to see if their products are holding up from a microbiome perspective, correct?
Yes, that's right. We have done, I think, over 40 studies, and we'll be doing some more. And we're starting now to do more and more work on our own products. But
Mm-hmm,
it was really helpful in the beginning to work with partners, and we'll still do some, and helped us to learn a lot about this industry that we were new to.
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you guys grew pretty quickly in the past 7 or 8 years now, almost, or eight, is it? Well, I met you when you had started. I think you were at it for a year or something, right?
We started in fall of 2016, so
Yeah, so 8 years.
going well, yeah, it
Almost.
will be 8 years in the fall.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Anyways, I wanted to get back to those milk-based probiotics for a second. So if you have an animal who is eating dairy, could they be beneficial then for those? Or what do you see? Because I know that when you do the microbiome tests, you collect a lot of information of what people are actually feeding, though I don't think that there's a checkbox for milk-based. So it probably would be hard for you to know whether they're on if they're getting goat milk or any of those other dairies.
Yeah, we did in the beginning, but it's really hard. People give so many supplements. It's really hard to collect good data that you can actually, use statistics on. So we have reduced the questions that we ask around that. But we know from our own use that if we add milk to like our own pet cat's diet, we see lactobacillus go up. Like, so we can show it with and so we can test as much as we want our own pets
Mm-hmm.
microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no, there's a lot of research that, we know how to grow them in the lab. So we know what these organisms like to feed on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
do you recommend, goat milk for your clients to feed your patients?
Yeah, as long as it still is raw, because there's also a problem with processing the milk itself, not just that you're killing the microbes in the process, but also that you're changing the arrangement and the structure of the milk components, which that seems to be more of an issue and a more allergy producing. Because I mean, I grew up on raw milk. I mean, we didn't have, I mean, once in a while we'd buy some non-raw milk, but usually it was just raw milk, but then we would heat it up. So I don't know, maybe that didn't really work either. You know, hot cocoa, if it's raw originally, you still cook it. But in any case, if someone wants to give dairy, I recommend doing it the raw version because that's much more digestible. But it sounds like you're saying that if you're just adding more milk or more dairy, the lactobacillus and such, they will just increase on their own. So then that begs the question, well, what's the point of adding probiotics then? Or, you know, lactobacillus, if the body just picks up, you know, production itself.
I mean, they have shown that some of these groups will help like produce short chain fatty acids. And so I think if there's an impaired function in the gut, like
Mhm.
they can be helpful, but I still prefer the you know, the more the FMT approach a bit more. But you know, not everybody wants to do that, and that's expensive, right? And so this
Mhm.
is an affordable option that can help support gut function.
Yeah, yeah. But basically you know, the point is that probiotics are not really necessary for animals that are healthy.
Right.
Yeah. And the thing is too that certain probiotics, well, a lot of probiotics have pretty much the same strains in them or the same species. They don't really tell you what the strains are. So given that there are probably not a gazillion manufacturers, I would assume that most of them are probably sourcing them from, I mean, how many manufacturers are there anyways? I guess that would be the question.
Well, there are like dominant ones, but then there are a lot of smaller ones. So I
Yeah.
have the number.
But most of them you probably will get them from the ones who make them commercial. I mean, like on a bigger scale, I would assume. So in any case, there are so many different probiotic supplements out there, but many of them are probably have the same ingredients and the same, you know, come from the same manufacturer. You could probably say, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, those big manufacturers, like they're five sort of really big ones, some of them have thousands of strains,
Mm.
and they may give different ones to different companies, especially those big.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, that's interesting. I didn't realize. I thought that they were only kind of manufacturing maybe 20 strains because that's all you see on the labels. You know, if you have a probiotic that has 20 different names on it, that's like a lot, right? Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Telling us this.
yeah, yeah. So no probiotics necessary for healthy animals, but with sick animals, there have been some studies that show that they can be beneficial, right?
I mean, usually it's around like fecal consistency. Is I feel like the number one thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because when I did a little bit of research, you know, in the last couple of days on the studies, that was a little bit what was the issue is that we don't really know how efficacious they are because only certain factors are being taken into consideration, and then some of the studies are also only done on a small number of animals, which makes it difficult to actually interpret. But it seems like the consensus is that if there is some GI issue, they may be beneficial. And they have seen some, I think the last one I read was on parvo, where they found that with parvo, um, if they were given probiotics, they improved. But I know that you have done some studies on that too with FMTs, or was it you or I mean, somebody did a study on FMT for parvo animals. And
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how it compares, but yeah, there was a really nice study done showing that FMT actually improves survivorship and reduced hospitalization time.
mhm,
For
yeah,
copies with parvo, but it's good. I mean, not everybody has access to that, so good to know if there's other alternatives that could be
mhm,
helpful.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
But you know,
scary.
you said something about price, you know, and FMT being more costly. But the thing is, you know, I'm all for paying less than necessary, right? But if we buy probiotics that aren't questionable as far as their function, and you have a healthy animal, in a way, you're wasting your money.
Yeah.
So in the end, it can become more costly to just continuously provide probiotics, and they're not doing anything. Plus, I also have seen a lot of animals that were on probiotics and they were on raw fermented, goat milk or other fermented things, and they had a pretty poor response to that, where whatever their symptoms were, they got a lot worse. And then, because somebody said that, oh yeah, this is the way you need to do it, they kept going for a year or two and no benefit. So that is very costly on a, from a financial perspective, because you're paying for something that's not really helping. And then from the cost of quality of life, that's hugely expensive as well. So I think that if we are trying a probiotic or a specific food or something, and we don't really see a big some improvement, or at least not a worsening, then you know that would kind of be a bit of an indication on whether we should keep going or not, right?
Absolutely, right. And giving something that they don't need that's not helping, right, can add up. You can think
Yeah.
it's not expensive, but it actually is. You're right.
Yeah, because if we keep fueling the inflammation by giving something that is making them worse, then eventually the whole, the body will continue to break down more and more. So we definitely want to be a little careful with that. So, but on the other hand, I also see some animals that initially do worse with, again, I don't use a lot of probiotics anymore. I mean, I think the last one I bought was like 6 years ago or something, or sold, aside from Saccharomyces boulardii. But in any case, sometimes when we do try to manipulate the gut environment and the microbes in the gut, there is a little bit of aggravation that can potentially happen. So how would you explain that? And how would you then determine on, how long to continue, and where to go from there?
Yeah, I mean, certainly with the FMT, you can see that it can make things worse first initially. And this, I think, can probably happen with some fibers too, right? You have to go slow, and just, I think the slow and gradual increase is really the way that
Mhm.
I found things to
Mhm.
like. And sometimes even with like the FMT capsules, one a week, or I even had one woman, her cat was so sensitive, she tried like one a month, and then she got to like every other week, and then one a week. And I mean, sometimes like they have like a chronic diarrhea case, right? And they've got them sort of stable. Like you don't want to, return that apple cart too easily, because then it's a whole nightmare getting them back.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. But sometimes we also kind of have to just bite through it, because there can be some die off and maybe even a little bit of diarrhea, which can be a good thing, because then it actually flushes things out. One of my favorite sayings is dilution is the solution to pollution. So diarrhea from something new is not necessarily a bad thing. It may just be that it's just flushing out the old and the gunk, basically, and the toxins. So, but obviously, if it keeps going for a long period of time, that wouldn't be great. I would still expect within like a couple of weeks for things to have resolved, and the animal not feeling worse in the process. So obviously, if your animal is starting to have a fever, or moping around, not eating, that sort of thing, that would be definitely of concern. But if they're still feeling good and they just have a little bit more flushing out, that can be a good thing.
Absolutely. And that, right, these animals are adapted to eat all kinds of things and have diarrhea as a normal response,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah,
it should be part of healthy gut function, is actually to have diarrhea when it's
when needed.
necessary, right, to flush things out.
Yeah, same with vomiting. Yeah, one time when I was a teenager, and I had left out some mashed potatoes for a day or two, which was not very smart. And I'm like, well, let's just try it. It tasted a little sour. I'm like, yeah, whatever. So I ate some, gave my dog some. About an hour later, we were both vomiting. But neither my dog nor I are vomiters, by nature or normally. But the body's like, no, that stuff gotta go. This is not good. And we were both fine after. Once it was out, we were both fine. So anyway, on that note, let's just look at. Do you have a minute more for a couple of questions?
I know some people might be trying to go right on to the inside scoop, but we'll see
Yeah,
if we
but
can.
they always have technical issues too, so usually they don't start on time. But anyways, so Lisa was asking thoughts on green juju raw goat milk daily for a healthy dog.
Well, I love their products. I haven't tried that one myself, but I have put it in my shopping cart before. I think, I mean, I would defer to you, Odette. Like,
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it depends. If your animal is doing well with it, then why not? If they're not doing well with it, then don't give it. That would be kind of my suggestion on that.
I like Whole Foods, right? It's great to be able to provide that in addition to, and if you buy commercial food.
Yeah, exactly. But there's also the thought that past puppyhood or kittenhood or any babyhood, we don't really go suck on somebody's tit anymore. So the question is, should we eat dairy or should we not? But that's a whole other story. So
Quite sensitive to dairy. Like I have one, he actually.
yeah. I think it depends. I mean, I do okay with these. So
yeah. I have a lactose intolerance, but I actually do think I would get more calcium if I like did drink milk. I went dairy free, but
well, you can chew on a bone.
How much would I actually absorb if I chewed on a bone?
Well, if it was a chicken bone that was all nice and soft already, you'd probably get quite a bit. But in any case, yeah. And then Patricia is asking, is there a strain you recommend while being on an antibiotic for skin bacteria?
This is a great question. I mean, I think I tend to recommend the Aspergillosis for being on antibiotics because it's not going to, it's a yeast-based probiotic, and so it won't, there's no chance that you're going to be selecting for antimicrobial resistance if you give a yeast probiotic while they're on an antibiotic. What would you recommend?
Yeah, that's what I recommend too. Well, I mean, you told me, so I do it. Well, because it helps to keep the Clostridium at bay a little bit too, so that's always good.
And it's like that E. coli example, like so people worry about like, oh, yeast on skin and the fact that Aspergillosis has a yeast, but it's a good yeast, and so it's actually going to help keep the bad yeasts in check, just like we were talking about.
Yeah, it outcompetes. That's good. And is there a strain of probiotic that targets itchy skin at all or itch at all?
Actually, I'm not really so familiar with what usually people are going more for like omega-3s and other things to support skin than the specific probiotics there. So I think it's coming, but I'm not aware of any. Are you?
No. And the thing is itchiness, depending on well, you have to figure out what is the cause of it. It could be food sensitivities, it could be something that they lay on, it could be a product that you're using in the house. I mean, there are so many causes. So, we're all obviously for a quick fix, but finding one strain that will basically take care of itchy skin I mean, would be nice to have. I mean, hey, I would like to have a magic wand, but I would kind of put it more into the magic wand category to have that. Yeah, we certainly would all like to have things a lot easier than they are, right?
I usually view it as probably there's some underlying gut problem contributing to the itchy skin.
Yeah, generally. And go ahead.
Skin's like the biggest organ, right? And the gut is also part of the skin.
Yeah, because they're all connected to the outside world. One is on the inside, but yeah. I mean, skin issues are challenging, especially if they've been going on for a longer period of time without, results. It takes a lot to figure out and start to turn things around. It's not simple in any way, shape, or form. So I would recommend, working with a holistic vet on that. But definitely gut health is crucial. And some of it also happens because they weren't set up properly with good microbes in the beginning, because what I find is extremely important to create a good microbiome from the start. And that's where what I focus on all my kittens and puppies patients, is to really make sure they get a really good start, because a lot of them are over vaccinated. They get antiparasitics like crazy. They get antibiotics, they get metronidazole, and that basically sets them up for failure, down the road, or for ill health, including skin, but certainly also gut issues, IBD and such. And because that's a very crucial phase in an, a young life, where the immune system is being trained and by the microbes of the gut and the skin, to respond appropriately to what is in the environment. So, for example, it's training the immune system to not react to chicken or beef or pollens or whatever it may be. And so a lot of these animals, they already came in with like a really poor microbiome. They started out with a poor microbiome, and that then basically creates a huge imbalance or malfunctioning or maladaptation of the immune system.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. So one more question here from Michelle. For animals who can tolerate them, would fermented foods provide some beneficial microbes in a more natural way?
I'm a big fan of fermented foods for people and for pets. Yeah, I think that they're different than the gut microbes that like are being killed by antibiotics, but they're also beneficial, and they've been shown in people to really help enhance diversity in the gut flora.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And the good thing about fermented foods is that generally they have more species of microbes, but they also have lower numbers of microbes. So then it's not quite like a probiotic where you just kind of throwing like a gazillion CFUs at them. So it's a bit different. And fermentation has been happening on the earth for like billions of years. Well, I don't know about billions, but a long time. And for example, dogs, they will take whatever they couldn't eat and they dig a hole, put it in there, and then they come back later when they're hungry again, and then there's a bunch of maggots and other stuff that's been growing and fermenting and all of that. So it's part of it. Cats may be less so, but dogs, it's definitely part of their nature to eat fermented things.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's more diverse and the numbers are more natural, and it's right. We've been at least for 10,000 years eating these kinds of foods and have our domestic animals.
Mm-hmm.
Dogs,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. All right. So, any final words of wisdom when it comes to probiotics, Holly?
I think if they're healthy, they don't need them. If they have a problem, you should work with your holistic veterinarian, and
Mm-hmm.
they can probably recommend things that would be a good use of your resources and
Mm-hmm.
help the animal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And my last word of advice is call the companies, find out what strains they are, and then put the strain in Google and see what comes up as far as research is concerned, and read some of these papers that are out there or not, and see what you get. But definitely make sure that you don't compare dog and cat microbiome or research with human research too much, because the microbiome of animals is different than the one from humans. So, for example, Fusobacterium is a great one for dogs and cats to have. For humans, it can cause colon cancer. So there are some significant differences. So you want to make sure that you look at the research that's being done with the animal species that you're trying to treat.
That's right. So don't eat dog poop.
I don't.
Relax.
On that note, let's have breakfast or something.
Time for
Yeah. Anyways, thank you so much, Holly, for being here, and thank you everyone for listening in and learning and for your questions. I'm going to go through the comments a little bit more, and if there are any questions that I can answer, I will do that. I know I didn't get to all of them because again, I seem to not be able to multitask very well. Focusing on Holly and what she says and the questions I want to ask, and then also your questions. It seems to be a problem. I need someone else to maybe do that. But in any case, thank you all for being here and Happy New Year. I think you can still say that, right? Because we're still at the end of the first week.
I think so too. Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks for spending your Sunday time with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right. And I will be posting this on YouTube as well, but the replay of this is always available on Facebook. So once it was live on Facebook, it's basically there until the end of time. So in any case, good to see you all. Love you. Bye.